Hey everybody, this is Perch. Whenever I talk about this topic, or kind of things around this topic, a lot of people come into the comments to say you're naive, you're optimistic, glass half full. Look how cheerful Perch is about comics. I mean, it's very, a lot of it's very condescending. But the part that is strangest about it is that I don't see this as good news. I actually see this as a threat and a challenge to comics, but people interpret it as being kind of this Pollyanna, everything is perfect narrative about comics. Let me kind of explain what I'm talking about. I don't get down that comic books are ruined or the business is destroyed or everything is dying or the world is imploding or any of that. I have no belief that those things are coming. A lot of channels do talk about that. Comics are over, comics are dying, it's terminal, cancer, it's death, it can't survive. They've ruined it, they've burned it all down. In fact, the only thing to do now is burn it down faster so it can just get to being burned down. That's a point of view that some people have. Not all. I'm just speaking generally here. That's a point of view people have. And I often do videos saying, that's kind of ridiculous. There's lots of reasons why that won't happen. No, Marvel is not, Disney's not going to dump Marvel tomorrow. They're still going to be producing Marvel comics. Yes, I think they're going to license more. If for, this Alex Ross experiment that's coming out, I think that's an example of where we're going to see more licensing, where more things could happen. But it's, I think that the idea of, AT&T dumping DC, the very strange thing that kind of comes into people's minds is like, well, AT&T owns Warner Media. Warner Media owns DC. Warner Media is currently leveraging a lot of DC products and IP and other things profitably to do their thing. And now Discovery's entering the picture. That must mean that Warner Brothers is going to shut down DC. Well, no, that math doesn't add up. That's highly unlikely that that's going to happen. And I say these things and people go, you're too optimistic. But here's the glass half empty part of the statement, and this is really where I'm coming from. It comes in two parts. Number one, and I have said this before, IP, comic book properties, characters, ideas, these creations, they're billion-dollar creations. We shouldn't be talking about one output of it, one license of it, i.e. comics, as something that could fold tomorrow. The fact that anyone's saying all this, even though it's unlikely and not true, even though it's not going to happen, the fact that that's the narrative around it is destructive. It's destructive for people coming into comics. It's destructive if you're trying to make a new company and you want to raise money to actually fund a new comic company. It's destructive if you're trying to find new distribution channels because the prevailing commentary is it could die at any minute. A healthy industry, a healthy business, a healthy vertical doesn't have this constant narrative around it, but comics does. And that's something that I think the industry has to grapple with. Not the people saying that it's going to go away. This is, again, the goofy part. And when you talk about business, you can be as pissed as you want at customers, at partners, at third parties, at other people bashing your product. You can be super pissed. You can view it as unfair. You could say that these people are wrong. And you could do that until you're blue in the face. But that doesn't change anything in what you have to do to make your business look presentable and attractive. The burden is still on you. You've got to make it work. You can't simply, you can't simply say, everything will be fine, and if everybody would just shut up. What if they don't shut up? Well, they don't suffer. You do. Your business does. You have to take care of it, or it blows up. And when there's constant dialogue and diatribe around how your business is a wreck, that's when you go hire a PR person. That's when you go hire marketing. That's when you go fix it. That's problem number one. I don't think comics is going to die. In fact, there's plenty of history and proof it will not. And there's a lot of history and proof to suggest that a lot of the negativity is absolutely ill-founded, is absolutely not coming from an educated place. That's going to piss some people off saying it that way. But when you do business, when you say coming from a not educated place, you're not calling the person inbred moron. You're talking about data. But well, whatever. But it's the second factor that I think is the more destructive, and that's this: if something is going to be wildly successful, strong, and what I mean by strong, I mean something that encourages other people to enter it, other people to make comics, other people to be part of this business. Right now, people get into comics for passion. They get into comics because they've always wanted to make comics. They get into comics because they've loved comics since they were a kid. There's lots of reasons why people get into comics that are all emotion-based. There's very few reasons people get into comics for business purposes. And by the way, that includes all the people making money via the crowdfunding stuff. Some people have made a lot of good money, and that's great. But it's still an individual effort, and it's still a lot of work to get to that return. And if we were talking, that this was a public company, you wouldn't want to have one successful public company surrounded by a bunch of dumpster fires. That wouldn't work either. So please, again, a lot of people come in and like, this is why, X, Y, and Z is the future. Sure, good for the individuals, still bad for the overall industry. And when I say it that way, that's not knocking. Every individuals need to make money. You all need to go out and be able to make your own cash. So that's not if you're able to go get that cash, good for you. Keep going to get that cash. Keep pushing. Nothing wrong with that at all. But at some point, if you have bigger ambitions, you start to care about the overall industry. Their problems do become your problems, to at least some extent. And that's something we have to wrestle with. Comics, the one thing that you can pretty much bank on is that it's going to go up and down. Because for decades now, there's been good times, there's been bad times. There was a DC explosion, followed very quickly by the DC implosion. Followed a couple years after that by a renaissance of some pretty amazing titles. We got Crisis, they pulled in John Byrne. And then we had the 90s and things blew up again. And then they got their asses handed to them by Image for a while. And then the New 52 came. And I'm skipping a bunch of stuff in between, by the way. There's been a lot of ups and downs for everyone in comics. If things are in a down right now, the one for certain thing that we know is that it's going to go back up again. Why? Because 50 years of history shows it will. The people who say it's dead this time for sure, there's no way for it to recover, you're not a student of history. You're not looking at the big picture. You're not looking at what's happened in comics before. The odds of it being done forever are extremely low. Comics will rebound and do fine. That's good news, right? Well, not really. Because when I've just painted this picture of this constantly bumping up and down road, it means that when things do recover, and they will, guess what's going to happen a couple years after that? It's going to tank again. You could say this is a overly negative way of looking at it, but I've got my business hat on. This is an MBA discussion. No sane person would go in and commit themselves financially, long term, to a business that is all over the map. That's the definition of insanity, and that's bad news. So when I tell you on these in shows and everything, it's like, no, don't worry, it's going to come back. Things are going to go back up again. That's good news, I guess, for the people who are working in it. Of course, it's not cratering completely. That's nice. It's good that history shows us that comics is resilient, but history also shows it that comics keep making the same mistakes to shoot itself in the foot again and again and again. This is a challenge that comics has. It is both resilient and constantly fallible. Over and over and over. At some point, it has to stabilize. And here's the thing, it can't really stabilize into a disaster. Why not, you might say? Because The two main US companies, Marvel and DC, are owned by mega corporations that are churning this stuff out into billions of dollars of returns. It's not going to just tank. There's two outcomes for comics. There is actual success, and there's status quo, which is a constantly bobbing around business that never gets to realize its full potential because it's always swinging wildly up and down from success into disaster. Unfortunately, if you're a betting man or woman, whatever you happen to be, the odds say that second one is most likely going to happen. There will be some individuals and there will be some small groups that will be able to make good money out of this business and be happy doing it. And there is nothing wrong with that. Good on them. If you are an individual creator, you've got a little bit of business sense, you're able to put a couple things out, you can certainly make yourself millions of dollars. You can do it. Hell, I mean, that's a home run. You could make yourself hundreds of thousands of dollars and then still probably be pretty happy working in this business that you love because you're in it for emotion. But if you are a CEO, if you're a CFO, if you're a COO, if you're a head of distribution, if you're a head of production, if you're a full-timer in a company, your world it looks grim because you can't ever fully achieve. You're kind of stuck in a weird limbo state. Again, you can continue to be in comics and be glad you're in comics for the passion of it. There's nothing wrong with that. But you also are if you're just doing game theory on your own career, if you're an executive at a comic company, you're wasting your life. You'd be much better off either if you have the talent going off on your own, or if you don't have the talent, going into some other business. Go into games. Go into movies. Go into find any startup tech company and just go there. You'll triple your money in a year. That's not to knock, again, people, there are plenty of people in comics, you've heard them, I've interviewed several of them, that are doing it because they love comics, and God bless them, man. That's awesome. But here's my challenge to you. If you love comics and you're in a position of authority at one of these large companies, you owe it to yourself to get comics out of this bobbing along on the bottom state that it's in. You may feel very glad and thankful that it's not going to collapse out from under you. I'm glad and thankful. You may think that those people online who talk about the entire comics industry blowing up tomorrow and everything's on fire and look at this one crowdfunding job, it's making more in your company, even though your company made 9 figures last year. You're Marvel. You may, sure. But those people are not the definition of your career. You are. And you've got to make a better world for yourself and a better world. I mean, if you love comics, if not for you, do it for the other people out there who would like to enter this field and excel at it, enjoy it, do amazing things. The challenge is, you go up and down the list. Great, comics isn't going to collapse. It's also stuck in this status quo. It's the definition of arrested development. Not the show. The show is funny. This isn't so much. This world keeps salaries down. It keeps projects more tense because you never know when things are going to continue or be canceled. It keeps everything short term. And sometimes you have a good year and other times you have a bad year, but you never really have a good year. And I guess it never gets bad enough for you to have, finally just say, enough, my dream isn't worth it, I'll leave. But I don't want you to leave. I want you to actually fix it. I want you to actually create a stable business where, I don't know that everything's just going to continue to bop up and down. That's what I want. That's what I want for comics. So again, for all the people out there who at various times will, comment that, why is Perch so optimistic about all this stuff? I got news for you. This isn't optimism. This is actually pretty grim. This is the glass half empty way of looking at things. This isn't healthy business. Could be, but this is not. Sometimes in business, and you see this a lot with little startups, they'll tell you things like, hey, this thing either needs to blow up, and when they say blow up, they mean it in a good way. It needs to, it needs to basically triple its stock price. It needs to have a hockey stick of revenue. It needs to do great. Or people say it needs to die. And sometimes in venture capital funds and people will take a relatively stable business, a company that's making $20 million a year, and go, yeah, but to be healthy you need to make 60. So we're just going to cash out and maybe you can sell off some of the patents and the end. That happens a lot. It happens because just surviving isn't success. And so when we talk about these things with comics, it needs to be an actual success, not just surviving. Comics is surviving, no doubt about it. That may not be good news. So there you have it. There's a lot to unpack there. Thanks for listening.